You've tried every strategy, every system, every mental hack that supposedly rewires your brain for wealth. And you're still in the same place. That's not a discipline problem. That's not a motivation problem. That's a permission problem. Think about the last time you were genuinely close to a breakthrough. Maybe you landed a bigger client than usual. Maybe you had a month where the money actually moved, really moved. Maybe you finally felt something that felt like momentum. And then, out of nowhere, something collapsed. An unexpected expense, a relationship that went sideways, a decision that seemed completely reasonable in the moment but quietly pulled everything back down to where you started. You told yourself it was bad timing. You told yourself you just needed more discipline. You told yourself next time would be different. But here's what was actually happening underneath all of that. Your brain was doing exactly what it was programmed to do. Every computer has a permission level, a security configuration that decides what software can run and what gets silently blocked. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care what you deserve. It just enforces the settings it was given. Your mind works the same way. And somewhere in your childhood, in the conversations you heard around the dinner table, in how your parents talked about money, in the financial reality you were surrounded by before you were old enough to question it, a default configuration was installed. A financial ceiling written into the code. Every time your income, your assets, or your opportunities push against that ceiling, your brain fires an autocorrection. A quiet, invisible pullback toward what it recognizes as normal. The terrifying part, you don't feel it happening, you just see the results. In the next few minutes, you're going to understand exactly how that ceiling was built, why every strategy you've tried keeps hitting it, and what a real OS upgrade actually looks like. Not a new habit downloaded onto old code, but a full rewrite of the permission level itself. Stay with me through the end. The piece I'm saving for last is the one that explains why this keeps happening even to the most driven, intelligent people, the ones who should have already broken through. Researchers studying financial psychology found something that should make you stop for a second. When people were asked to estimate the maximum income they could realistically achieve in their lifetime, the answers clustered around one number, roughly 2 to 3 times what their parents earned at the peak of their careers. Not 2 to 3 times what they wanted, what they believed was actually possible. And here's where it gets darker. Even when people exceeded that number through a business that took off, through an investment that worked, through sheer relentless effort, a measurable percentage found ways to return to the familiar level within 2 to 3 years. Not because the opportunity disappeared, because staying above the ceiling felt psychologically wrong. Unsafe, exposed like fraud. The brain registers unfamiliar success the same way it registers physical danger, with elevated cortisol, with hypervigilance, with an overwhelming drive toward restoration. That's not weakness. That's not lack of ambition. That's a protection system working exactly as designed. The problem is that it was designed for a version of your life that no longer exists. The ceiling isn't one thing, it operates in 3 distinct layers and they function at completely different depths. The first layer is visible. These are the behaviors you can actually catch yourself doing: overspending when income rises, undercharging, avoiding direct conversations about money, procrastinating on investments that make complete logical sense. Most content about financial mindset lives here. New habits, new systems, new accountability, and it works until the second layer activates. The second layer is identity, not your goals, your self-concept, the story you carry about what kind of person you are in relation to money. This layer doesn't respond to habits, it responds to evidence. If your identity says, "I'm someone who struggles financially," every success becomes an anomaly, a temporary glitch the system needs to correct. You don't experience this as a thought. You experience it as a nagging sense that the success isn't real yet, that it's about to be taken away. That somehow you got lucky. But the third layer is the one almost nobody talks about. The third layer is biological. It's the neurological baseline calibrated during childhood based on the financial environment you were immersed in. Your brain built a pattern, a deep expectation of what normal looks and feels like. And whenever you deviate significantly from that pattern, the amygdala fires. Not because you're in danger, because you're unfamiliar. And to the oldest parts of your brain, unfamiliar and dangerous are the exact same signal. Here's the shift that changes everything. You've been treating this like a discipline problem your entire life. Get up earlier, read more, build better systems, push harder, force your way through the ceiling. But what you've actually been doing is running high-performance applications on a low-permission operating system. The apps are good, some of them are excellent, but the OS won't authorize them to run at full capacity. You are not lazy, you are not undisciplined, you are not unlucky. You are running the wrong version of yourself for the goals you're trying to execute. And the implication of that, sit with this for a second, is that working harder on the same OS doesn't upgrade the OS. It accelerates the crash. There's a pattern that emerges when someone keeps hitting the same financial ceiling despite changing their strategies, despite putting in real effort, despite being genuinely intelligent about the process. They escalate. Longer hours, more content consumed, more sophisticated systems, more brutal standards held against themselves. And here's what that escalation actually does neurologically. Chronic high effort under sustained pressure produces consistent cortisol elevation. And chronic cortisol has one defining behavioral consequence: it progressively narrows your decision-making toward the familiar. Stress is an evolutionary danger signal. Under perceived danger, your brain doesn't innovate. It contracts toward the known, the established, the safe. So the harder you push against the ceiling while stressed, the more powerfully your brain gravitates toward the financial patterns it already recognizes. You aren't moving forward. You're cycling faster inside the same perimeter. The effort is real, the movement is an illusion. This is the part that quietly breaks people. You've done everything right, followed the roadmap, held yourself to a standard most people wouldn't even attempt. And you're still here. The worst version of this isn't giving up. The worst version is when you start to accept that the ceiling is you, that there's something fundamentally broken, that other people were given something you weren't, that maybe this is just as far as you go. That belief is the most destructive software running on your current system. Because the moment you internalize the ceiling as identity, you stop looking for the override. The OS upgrade isn't a mindset shift. Mindset shifts are cosmetic, a fresh coat of paint on an unchanged architecture. It's a three-part neurological reconfiguration, and it works because it hits all three layers simultaneously. The first part is ceiling identification, not just intellectually knowing a ceiling exists, but locating its specific calibration. Ask yourself honestly, at what income level, when you imagine holding it consistently, does something in you start to feel slightly unreal, slightly unsafe? Right at the edge of that comfort is your current permission level. Write it down. That's not your ceiling because you're limited. That's your ceiling because it's what you were shown was possible. The second part is graduated exposure. This is the performance psychology principle, progressive overload applied to financial identity. You don't destroy the ceiling by attacking it head-on. You extend it incrementally, consistently, until the new level becomes neurologically familiar before pushing to the next threshold. The brain doesn't resist growth. It resists sudden unfamiliarity. Small, repeated exposures to slightly higher financial realities recalibrate the baseline over time. The brain updates what it considers normal. And once a level is normalized, the autocorrection no longer fires at that height. The third part is identity replacement at the source, the most uncomfortable of the three. It means going upstream to the original installation and rewriting the narrative with deliberate, verifiable evidence. Not affirmations, not visualization, evidence construction. Every time you make a decision that belongs to the identity you're building, even a small one, you're not just changing a behavior. You're submitting a new data point to the system that decides who you are in relation to money. The brain updates identity based on repeated observable data, not on what you want to believe. Feed it enough data from the new configuration, and the permission level shifts. This is what separates people who break through from people who keep cycling. Not harder effort. A different OS running the effort. The brain that runs the supreme mentality doesn't fight against wealth. It doesn't white-knuckle through the ceiling. It doesn't even register the ceiling anymore, because the ceiling was recalibrated to a level far beyond where the old system used to stop. Decisions flow differently. Ambition feels different, less desperate, more inevitable. Setbacks land differently, as data, not as confirmation that you were right to doubt yourself. Opportunities that used to feel like lucky accidents start to feel like the natural output of a system running as intended. You're not grinding against resistance. You're operating in a different architecture entirely. One last thing. That ceiling installed in you, it was never yours to begin with. It was someone else's financial reality handed to you through proximity, through observation, through an environment you were placed in before you had any say in the matter. You inherited the OS, you never chose it. The question now is whether you keep running it. Because the upgrade doesn't promise everything becomes easy. It builds a system calibrated for you, running at your actual capacity, without the invisible autocorrection pulling you back towards someone else's normal. Start with the number that feels slightly unreal. That's your door. The ceiling was never the ceiling. It was always a default setting waiting to be changed.